Greetings, smallcasters. Not quite the right glass. Should turn that round, shouldn't I? Gin cocktail. It's meant to be a Kentish garden, but it's not quite the same as at the Maidstone distillery, even though it's their recipe, supposedly. I don't think it is. Not anymore, because I'm sure theirs don't have lime in it anymore. Anyway, that's a mushroom. Essentially, that's an Agaricus bisporus, common mushroom. Okay, we're going to cook some. And in fact, what old Farmer Maggot's wife gave me. Great big basket full. I've got mixed, I've got mainly, so I've been a bit on the tight side. I've got mainly just normal sort of, not really button mushrooms, but you know, those standard sort of mushrooms. I've got some chestnut mushrooms, and then I've got some mixed foreign ones, as it were. Okay, because tonight we're going to have garlic mushrooms. Now, I have given these a little bit of a wipe, but they weren't particularly dirty because they're cultivated. And the general consensus is when you want to clean your mushrooms, you shouldn't soak them in water. A lot of chefs, now the smaller ones, by the way, I'm just sort of halving, or I might even leave whole. Actually, no, I will halve them anyway. The bigger ones I'm quartering. So chefs like Jamie will say to you, don't ever wash your mushrooms. They absorb water. Well, that's true. But it's not strictly correct that you shouldn't wash them. You can do, if you want to wash them, 5-10 seconds under running water, immediately drain them and pat them dry. Okay, because they will soak up liquid. Okay, and when we cook these, one of the things that we're going to want to try and do is get some of that liquid out. So we don't want to end up putting loads more in, do we? Okay, so yes, I know I'm coming to that. Keep your nose out. You've got one job to do tonight. Just do it properly. Yes, I said I'm coming to that. Stop arguing. Yeah, so don't soak them. So I'm just gonna, I need to get these done because once I've got like the oil and butter, which I'll tell you about in a minute, ready, we'll be more or less frying them. So they need to be prepared. Okay, but what is a mushroom? Well, you know, this is actually the fruiting body of a fungus, and a lot of this most of it, masses of it, mycelial growth underground or in some other food source. It can be in soil, or it can be rotting wood, things like that. But these are the fruiting bodies, as they're called. And some can literally appear overnight and disappear just as quickly. Others can, you know, hang around a lot longer. Okay, so this particular mushroom, getting a science lesson now, you can see here it's closed up. This one illustrates where it's opened out the bottom, and you can see the gills, as these are called, and on those gills are where all the spores are. Okay, and that's a way, one of the ways in which the mushroom, got to be careful with this knife. I've been sharpening my knives with my new sharpener. They're not still quite there yet. They're just getting the angles adjusted, but they're a lot sharper. So I've got to be a bit careful. So yeah, so these are the reproduction bits, if you like. Now, the next thing I'm going to need to prepare is some onion. Now, it says about one small or half a small red onion, but to be honest, these red onions of mine are quite small. Whoops, That won't do the blade any good, will it? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use one whole small one and just want to dice that up. Okay, and then I've got some, you want about 3 or 4 cloves of garlic, but since it's meant to be garlic mushrooms, I've got a bit more than that. You want some Dijon mustard. You want about 115 grams of butter divided into 2, because we put it in 2 different lots. A little bit of olive oil, about 3 tablespoons of chopped parsley, 3 tablespoons of chicken stock, and some Worcestershire sauce. And I think I've covered everything. So, this is the largest pan I've got. Well, I could have done it with wok, but I'm not going to. There does look like that's going to be a job all fitting in there. But remember, as I said to you, when we start cooking these, they will reduce down as they lose moisture. So I'm going to add about 3 tablespoons of... Move me bloody thing over there. Get out of the way. I've had a little reorganisation, you might better tell. Okay. Some new lighting arrangement. Oh, I forgot my things over here now. So I'm then going to put the butter in there. Half of the butter, I said. And we're going to push this onto a medium heat. And we want to melt down that butter. And when that's nice and hot, we're going to add in the I thought we cooked them first. I'm going to have a little check of the recipe here, because I thought we cooked the onion first. But never mind. But anyway, I'll tell you what a mushroom is. The alternative, well, alternative, another type of fungal fruiting body is a toadstool. I'm just telling them. Toadstools are generally considered poisonous. You've got to be very careful with mushrooms that you pick in the wild, because you don't know whether you're picking poisonous ones or not. If you can't identify a mushroom, by the way, using your field guides and things like that, you basically consider it poisonous and don't eat it. Don't pick it. But a toadstool is about the 14th century. They started using the word toadstool, and it was in terms of a stool for a toad, and it was all part of the implication that this thing was poisonous. Now, toadstools, yes, I'm telling them now. Keep your eyes to yourself, you filthy, dirty little bastard. I see where you're looking. Toadstools, quite often associated with gnomes. Yes, she's a gnome. You're an elf. Absolutely no way. Stop! Dirty bastard. So, mushrooms weren't necessarily always the things people ate. Okay, I'm just waiting for that to melt down. Right, I'm going to let that melt down and then we'll move on to the next bit. Good job I double checked. We put the mushrooms in first. So, I'm going to start putting these in there. And like I say, I know, did one go down the side there? Or did that go in there? We'll have a look in a minute. I know these aren't all necessarily going to be sitting. One I think definitely fell down the back there somewhere. Oh, that did. Oh, that did. Get that out of the way for a minute. Yep, thought it did. So what we're going to do is that we're going to let them cook and then attempt to turn them to keep them obviously well going, you know, all mixed in and get them all cooking. Definitely need a bigger pan for this. I need another gin. Wait, I know she's coming on to you. Remember, she's an elf, a gnome, and she's a naughty gnome. And you're innocent, mate. Don't you get? You're an elf. No, you're not a bloody gnome. Stop trying to pretend you're a gnome. Just, you've got one job to do today. Just get on with it. Useless. So the word mushroom sort of derives, it's believed, from the French moucheron or moucheron, which basically means moss. So I don't know if it's anything to do with the way it grows. but sort of 15th, 16th century, they were using terms like mushroom, mushrooms, moucheron, mushrooms, until eventually we end up with a word that we more commonly know as mushroom. Now, I was saying to you about if you don't know whether it's an edible one, you treat it as poisonous. Even your standard mushroom, oh, it's a chestnut one, but there's a standard mushroom in it. A standard mushroom can cause problems, allergic reactions to some people if they eat them too raw. Essentially, they produce a compound in small quantities, hydrazines, but when you cook them, it destroys the hydrazines. So generally, you're okay, even if you do have a slight allergic reaction. Well, actually, it can be quite a severe allergic reaction, but if you cooked them, you should be all right. Okay, I've never come across anybody with a mushroom allergy. Now, you do get dodgy mushrooms, but anyway, I'll tell you about them in a minute. Wait, eyes off. I'm just going to turn these a bit in a minute, and we're just going to keep them turning, and then we'll be adding the mushroom and the garlic, the onion and garlic later. By the way, I think until he interrupted me, I was telling you, you want about 3 or 4 garlic cloves, but it's meant to be garlic mushrooms. I'll tell you this. I think I'm having deja vu in a minute. I've got a few more than that. Some of these are getting a bit old and tired. I always use actually. So what I didn't tell you is I've got about 900 grams of mushrooms here, and you can see how much they have reduced down. They're starting to get a nice bit of colour to them, and we're getting a lot of liquid in there, okay, which we want to drive off, because we're going to be adding some chicken stock. Not a lot, but we want these to be sort of more sort of coated in a nice sort of thick gravy, if you like, rather than swimming in whatever. So I'm going to carry on cooking these for a little bit longer. Okay. I've got me onion ready, I've got my garlic ready. I was telling you about dodgy mushrooms, magic mushrooms. Psychobilin, I think it is. Hallucinatory chemical that is found in some mushrooms, particularly a type known as magic mushrooms or shrooms. Okay, some countries they're illegal, some they're not. Okay, so sometimes they're obtained on the black market. Essentially, they give you like hallucinations, things like that. But in folk medicine and some other sort of cultural rituals, they were used to instill these hallucinatory sort of type states. It was also used in some healing recipes. There's evidence, scientific evidence, that shows that some of these psychedelic compounds can help people who get these like cluster migraines in small quantities, and also there's some suggestion it can help in severe OCD cases. I mean, as I'm talking, you can see how much these are reduced down. So like I say, initially it looked like the pan was nowhere near big enough, but as that moisture, because like I say, they act like sponges, and that's one of the reasons quite often people think these are things that like magically appear, which is why they've been associated with magic and fairy stories and gnomes. Stop eyeing her up. I know she's coming on to you. I know she is, because she's a naughty gnome. You're not. Behave yourself. But it's partly because they absorb the moisture and balloon out, if you like. And it's equally another reason why they can shrivel up as they lose that moisture. So I think we're starting to get to the stage where we're ready to add that garlic and that onion. I'm going to add a generous pinch of salt. You can add this at the beginning because that might help get the moisture out of it, but to be honest, you didn't really need it. A generous amount of freshly ground black pepper. Okay. And then you want about a tablespoon of tomato puree. Okay, in that goes. And then in goes that onion. And we then just want to add, yes, I am aware, as I already said to you, ignore her. Yes, I know, she's trying to entice you. I can see what she's doing. Ignore her. She's a naughty gnome. Kids today, eh? So, want to get that garlic in there. And then we're going to give this a good old mix through. Okay, and we're going to carry on cooking the mushrooms and the onion and the garlic. So I've just turned that heat down a little bit, although I might have just gone a bit too far. You can see how much their mushrooms have reduced. So, you know, you start with that huge bowl and thinking, that's for 2 people. But you can see now, given that this is all we're having, we're not having it with anything else. Obviously still a substantial amount there, but even so, not quite the overpowering amount that you think there is. It's interesting, that sort of, whatever that one is, that one that looked like cauliflower, that's gone quite soggy. So we're going to cook these a little bit longer. We want this to thicken up a bit and start looking all nice and glossy, which it is, but it's still a bit wet. And then we're going to be adding about a tablespoon of Dijon mustard. You can have other mustard if you like. And then about 2 tablespoons of chicken broth. Now you're going to want some lemon zest, zest of a lemon. Like I say, you want the other half of that butter, some Worcestershire sauce and some parsley, and that's all that's going into it. Oh, I thought that was a mint. That's me line. Oi! Get your, you dirty little bastard! I don't care when she asked you to. She's a naughty dame. Get your hand off. Get your hand off. Oh, you dirty little bastard. I'm trying to explain that there are over 14,000 types of fungi, mushrooms. Fungi. And instead I'm having to tell you off for doing naughty things with a naughty name. Yeah, there's a huge amount. And they're all, you know, completely different in some cases. Some you might not get the fruiting bodies. Others you might get quite substantial fruiting bodies. And then you get sort of specific ones. Fire starter fungi. Fire starter. Sometimes known as tinder fungi. And then there's a lot of work going on the use of mushrooms. For instance, there's some types of mushroom or fungi that can reduce bacteria levels in water, and so they're used to help decontaminate water. And well before synthetic dyes come along, mushrooms were the main source of dye, and you could get the whole spectrum of colours from mushrooms. Not obviously necessarily these type of mushrooms, but remember there's 14,000 different types of mushroom. Okay, and so they were, for man-made fibres, for a long time, the source of colouring. So we're going to give that a little bit longer yet, still quite a bit of moisture in there. Oh, I was about to pick that up then and drink the wrong thing. Okay, I think we're ready now. So we're going to add this tablespoon of mustard, and I'm going to add 1, 2, 3 tablespoons of chicken stock. Might seem a bit weird. Why are we putting chicken stock into a mushroom dish? But again, it's all about the flavours, bringing out different flavours and so on. And the chicken stock does actually enhance the mushroom, if you like. So just going to stir all that through, and now we do want to start reducing that down. Excuse me, must be the gin. Now, as we all know, should do, because if you're not a Tolkien fan, you know where you can go, don't you? We've done before about mushrooms and hobbits, and a lot of the stuff to do with hobbits and the love of mushrooms and things like that comes from, actually this is starting to thicken up a little bit now, Tolkien's childhood. He was brought up in Hall Green, Birmingham, and had a bit of an idyllic childhood. Him and his brothers and that, they used to roam around the fields and things like that. And a lot of that area was his inspiration for the Shire. And in fact, the story in Lord of the Rings of Frodo and Farmer Maggot seems to have been inspired by a local farmer who, him and his younger brother Hilary, nicknamed sort of Black Ogre, if you like, because he once chased after and tried to chastise the young Ronald Tolkien for picking wild mushrooms. So not even from his actual mushroom fields, although I don't think anybody actually, apart from in Lord of the Rings, has mushroom fields. But even though these are wild mushrooms, he had a go at young Tolkien, and that seems to be the inspiration. Cock up, find me drink then. Oh, panic. Now I'm going to have to read this one. Just going to turn that down a minute. But Tolkien actually said, I am in fact I'll start again. I am in fact a hobbit in all but size. I like gardens, trees, and unmechanised farmlands. I smoke a pipe, and I like good plain food, unrefrigerated, but detest French cooking. I like and even dare to wear in these dull days ornamental waistcoats. I am fond of mushrooms out of a field, have a very simple sense of humour, which even my appreciative critics find tiresome. I go to bed late and I get up late when possible. Right, while that carries on reducing down, what I'm going to do with my parsley is I'm just going to, we're just going to chop that up. Actually, going back to Tolkien, when he sort of wrote, essentially when he did Lord of the Rings, he sort of had a little bit of a pause, and he decided that before he could actually really properly talk about the Lord of the Rings properly, he needed to have a back history. So he essentially sort of stopped what he was doing, as it were, on the story, and even though he sort of also carried on doing this later, but he created this back history for, you know, the origin of everything, if you like. The elves, hobbits, man, all this, that and the other, Sauron and so on. And it's there that he mentions about mushrooms, and like the elves didn't like mushrooms. The elves were very wary of mushrooms. The Eldar, which if you know Tolkien, you know what I'm talking about, they tended to shun mushrooms, mainly because they thought they were cursed by Morgoth. By the way, we moved on to the wine now. Decided better not have too many gins. So I've got that parsley chopped. But whether it's partly because Tolkien knew his history or not, I don't know. But like I mentioned earlier, now this is starting to get to that stage where we're almost ready to do our final sort of stages. Like for instance, in Shakespeare's England, whether mushrooms were edible or not was a bit questionable. So in 1630, a Bath physician from Bath in England, not in his bath, he might have been in his bath, but it was his bath in Bath. A guy called Tobias Venner, and again I'm going to have to read this. He said, "Many fantastical people do greatly delight to eat of the earthly excrescences called mushrooms, whereof some are venomous, and the best of them unwholesome for meat. For they corrupt the humours, and glue to the body a phlegmatic, earthy, and windy nourishment. Wherefore they are convenient for no season, age, or temperament." So basically, he weren't very happy with them. And Dr. Bradwell, at about the same time, he observed, "Some have taken up with the foolish trick of eating mushrooms or toadstools. Let them now be warned to cast them away. For the best authors hold the best of them all at times in degree venomous." So basically, 16th or 1600s or whatever, very dodgy. Right. I think we're almost ready now for that final stage. And I'm still watching you. At this point, I'm just going to turn that down a bit lower. And I'm just going to zest one lemon into it. Oops, better take the cover off. I can see. You're going to have to go, darling. You're too naughty. So I'm just going to zest that lemon over that. Now, by the 17th century, despite what we said earlier about, you know, people warning about don't eat them, they're so unwholesome and venomous, and things it'll do inside your body. A guy called Sir Kenneth Digby produced a cookbook in which he talks about pickling and preserving champignon. And this is at the time of the that's my fingernail, English Civil War, and he spent a lot of that trying to be away from, you know, what was going on in Paris. And so therefore it's possible that's where he picked up about champignon and eating mushrooms. So he wrote about it, and other cookbooks mentioned about it. But even so, oh, by the way, so we'll just stir that in, and now we add that other half of butter. So now what we're doing is obviously just letting that all melt into that, emulsify into it. And so now we're down to the final two ingredients in a minute, the parsley and the Worcestershire sauce. So even though there were some people who talked about eating it, eating mushrooms that is, there was still this feeling there's something not right about mushrooms, how treacherous they could be. Mainly because some, like these, are edible, bloody well hope so, and others were obviously not edible. And people were poisoned as a result of eating them. And because of this not knowing for sure, am I eating something that's going to kill me? People were very wary of them. They used hostile language, and they're often associated, partly because of where some of these, because like I said, they grow in soil, they grow on rotting trees, other vegetation, things like that. And so they have this association with filth. Yes, and different sort of filth that's going through your mind, you dirty little bugger. Right, that is starting to look like that's almost there. So we're just going to cook that. It's on really low at the minute. I've perhaps gone a bit too low. Remember, I'm on my small burner. So I'll eat these with a spoon. Okay, so you can see there's still a bit of sauce in there. But let's give this a go. Getting hints of that mustard. Slight little tang from the lemon, which is surprising. There's not an awful lot of zest went in there. And a very, very slight hint of that Worcestershire sauce. But definitely mushroom. I'm not even sure you really get much garlic through. And it's meant to be garlic mushrooms. But there you go. I don't think I mentioned yet. That was from a guy called Chef Brian, who I recently discovered. Filth. Don't look. Disgusting. And that was his take on garlic mushrooms. Enjoy.